Welcome to the Biotech podcast, where science meets business. If breakthrough biotech, bold innovations, and the business behind the science gets you excited, you're in the right place. Make sure to check us out on Substack, X, and LinkedIn at Bowtied Biotech for even more insights and updates. All right, we've got a lot to cover today, so let's dive right in.
Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive. We're about to plunge into the dynamic, fast-paced, and honestly often surprising world of biotechnology.
It really is. Constantly evolving, breakthroughs one day, maybe setbacks the next.
Absolutely. And for this deep dive, we've pulled together a collection of the latest significant movements in biotech news. We're talking major drug deals, some really promising trial results.
But also some cautionary tales, right? And interesting funding stuff, too.
Exactly. So our mission today is to unpack these updates, pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge, and really try to understand what they mean for the future of medicine, for scientific innovation. Think of it as your shortcut to being, incredibly well-informed.
And we're not just going to list what happened. Critically, we want to get into why it matters, sort of connect the dots between these individual stories, see what broader trends they might be signaling across the whole biotech landscape.
See the forest for the trees. Love it. Okay, let's unpack this then. Let's dive straight into Chimera Therapeutics. They've had two very different but equally significant recent deals.
Right, two big ones.
So first up, Chimera inked his exclusive option deal with Gilead, potentially worth up to a frankly, whopping $2 billion.
Huge number.
Yeah, huge. It's specifically for immune-related targets, and it feels like a massive validation for Chimera's targeted protein degradation platform. That's that cutting-edge approach.
Right. Instead of just blocking proteins, it actually aims to eliminate them entirely.
Precisely. So this really signals Big Pharma's belief in the underlying tech, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. Gilead putting that kind of potential money on the table. That's a strong signal.
But then you have the Sanofi situation.
Yeah.
And that presents a really fascinating contrast. Sanofi decided to walk away from its lead IRAK4 program that targets a specific inflammation pathway. Yet they kept their interest in some of Chimera's earlier stage assets.
Yeah, so a pullback on one specific thing, but still keeping a foot in the door on others.
So what's fascinating here is that divergence, like you said.
Exactly. It really highlights how priorities are constantly shifting, inside these big pharma immunology portfolios.
So when a major player like Sanofi backs off a lead program, but keeps looking at earlier stuff from the same platform, what does that tell us?
Well, it tells us a lot about their evolving strategy. It's complex.
So what do you think is really driving those shifting priorities? Is it just portfolio management or something deeper about understanding these immune pathways? Or maybe changing risk appetite?
It's probably a bit of all of that, honestly. You've got internal pipeline stuff. Maybe Sanofi has another program in that area that looks better to them right now.
Okay.
But it also signals a kind of a refined approach to platform validation. They seem to believe in Chimera's protein degradation tech generally, just maybe not that specific target's path to market for them at this moment.
Right.
And actually for Chimera, this Sanofi decision, while it might look like a setback for IRAK4, it actually freed up capital, and they're now pouring that into accelerating STAT6.
STAT6. That's emerging as their most promising candidate now.
Seems to be, yeah. So investors are definitely reading this whole thing as a refocusing moment for Chimera. You've got Gilead validating the core platform. While Sanofi's move is more of a strategic step back on one specific program, it's, a nuanced signal for the market. Platform looks good, but individual targets still have to really prove themselves.
It really does highlight the incredibly complex decisions Big Pharma faces with new tech. It's never just a simple yes or no, is it?
Right, never.
And that complexity is maybe even more evident when we look at clinical trial results. Headline numbers can often hide a much more intricate reality.
Oh, for sure. You always have to read the footnotes, so to speak.
Let's peel back the layers on a couple of those, starting with Nektar Therapeutics.
Okay.
They were in the news recently for their eczema drug, resbagaldoslucin. Big headline. Met its primary endpoint phase IBA trial, impressive 83% ESI-75 response. So it's fantastic, right?
On the surface, 83% ESI-75, that's a standard measure for significant improvement in eczema. That is impressive. But this is where the deeper dive comes in.
Okay.
Analysts pretty quickly flagged concerns. Small sample size in the trial was one thing, and then issues with something called dropout imputation.
Dropout imputation.
Yeah.
Okay, can you break that down a bit? Why is that a red flag, and how could it affect that 83% number?
Sure. So dropout imputation basically means the trial designers have to make assumptions about patients who leave the trial early. Often, the default assumption is that they didn't respond to the treatment.
Ah, okay.
Now, if a lot of patients drop out and you apply that assumption, the reported efficacy can end up looking, well, artificially high, especially compared to the real world, where patients might start because it isn't working or because of side effects.
Right, so it might not hold up outside the trial setting.
Exactly. It's why statisticians look so closely at how that number was reached, especially when you're trying to compete with a market leader like Dupixent, which has, years of solid real-world data behind it.
Makes sense.
And skeptics are also pointing to certain statistical methods, like NRI non-responder imputation, which kind of works on that same principle, assuming non-response for dropouts.
So it's not just hitting the number, but how you hit it.
Precisely. Does it truly reflect real-world benefit, and how it stacks up competitively? That's the key question.
That's a really critical distinction. And speaking of promising data needing a closer look, Amgen. They recently released positive phase 2 data for their long-acting obesity drug, Maritide.
Right. Maritide.
The results look good. 14.5% weight loss at 52 weeks. Plus, and this is a big plus, a very convenient monthly dosing schedule.
That monthly dosing is definitely eye-catching. But even with that strong efficacy number, there are still some lingering concerns for Maritide, mostly around GI tolerability, nausea, that kind of thing, and patient dropout rates.
Which are always critical for chronic treatments like obesity drugs.
Absolutely. On the positive side, though, the weight loss hadn't actually plateaued by the end of the study. That suggests there might be potential for even more weight loss with longer treatment.
So, upside potential there.
Definitely. But if we zoom out a bit, look at the bigger picture for the obesity drug market. That once-monthly dosing is a huge potential selling point, right? A real differentiator for convenience.
For sure.
However, Amgen really has to prove that the tolerability side won't limit how many people actually use it. This market is getting crowded, and it's increasingly being defined by the overall patient experience, not just the numbers on the scale.
Yeah, people won't stick with it if the side effects are too rough, no matter how well it works on paper.
Exactly. Patient adherence is key.
So when you put these two trials together, Nectar and Amgen, it really drives home how much convenience and side effects can make or break a drug's success, even with strong efficacy numbers. It's way more complex than headlines suggest.
It really is.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, and maybe a bit of a cautionary tale that echoes some of this complexity we've just been talking about. Let's talk TG.
Ah, TGT.
This was once, massively hyped. The next big checkpoint target in immuno-oncology, that field, using the immune system to fight cancer, now is pretty much the cautionary tale for the industry.
Definitely a big shift in sentiment there.
So what happened? You had Big Pharma, Roche, Merck, others spending billions, literally billions, advancing anti-TIGIT antibodies into late-stage trials.
Huge investments, phase 3 programs.
And then the trials ultimately failed. The efficacy it didn't pan out. After all that money, all that effort, the promise just wasn't delivered.
Yeah, the collapse of TIGIT was a really stark lesson, and the industry is, frankly, still digesting it. It seems to have boiled down to a few key things.
Like what?
Well, probably poor patient selection criteria in the trials. Also, significant mechanistic uncertainty, basically, not fully understanding how the target actually worked in humans.
Even though they were in late-stage trials.
Even then, and frankly, there was likely a rush to chase the kind of massive profits they saw with the PD-1 combination therapies.
Right, the blockbusters. Everyone wanted the next PD-1 combo.
Exactly, those revolutionized cancer treatment, and everyone was desperately looking for the next big thing to pair with them.
But why did so many huge, experienced companies commit so much capital if that mechanistic clarity just wasn't really there? Was it just hype getting out of control?
It was a mix, I think. There was promising preclinical data, in labs and animal models, and the biological rationale, it sounded good on paper.
Aye.
But as we learn over and over in biotech, translating that early promise into actual clinical success in humans is incredibly difficult. And you also had immense competitive pressure. Everyone wanted to be first. Everyone wanted to capitalize on the success of the existing checkpoint drugs.
So speed maybe trumped deeper understanding.
It looks like that environment might have led some companies to maybe deprioritize digging deeper into the mechanism in favor of getting into the clinic faster.
Which raises a really important question, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About how the industry approaches these novel targets.
Absolutely. TIGIT's unraveling is now serving as this major warning sign for other emerging checkpoint targets. Things like LE3, CD73, there's still a lot of enthusiasm for those.
But maybe more caution now.
Definitely more caution. Mechanistic clarity is still, significantly lacking for some of them, and companies are proceeding much more carefully after the TIGIT experience.
So as you, our listener, reflect on this TIGIT story, what does it reveal about the inherent risks, the uncertainties in cutting-edge drug discovery, and that immense pressure to innovate quickly? It's a pretty brutal reminder that even billions of dollars don't guarantee success.
A very humbling reminder for the field.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit now. Let's look at some longer-term plays and maybe some novel funding strategies shaping biotech. Alphabet's longevity-focused arm, Calico.
Calico, yeah. Alphabet's aging research company.
Right. They recently struck a major collaboration with China's Mabwell Bioscience. This deal is potentially worth up to $570 million.
Another big potential number.
And the focus is on Calico's anti-inflammatory asset codename 9MWR3801, which is aimed at targeting aging-related diseases.
And what's fascinating here, I think, is that this follows an earlier, pretty hefty joint investment of $500 million back in 2018.
So they're doubling down, essentially.
Kind of. And the partnership is continuing, despite a significant setback they had with another candidate, Fosagonifator.
Right. That was the ALI targeting one?
Yeah. And unfortunately, it was unsuccessful in a phase 2 trial. So despite that clinical challenge, you see this continued strong commitment to the underlying biology of aging, and specifically their anti-inflammatory approach.
They're clearly in it for the long haul.
Seems like it. It's a long-term bet on understanding and tackling aging itself.
Okay, and then on the funding front, kind of a different angle, we have Manovia Therapeutics and Israeli Biotech, and they specialize in mitochondrial augmentation therapies.
Very specialized area, yeah.
They're planning to go public, but not through a traditional IPO. They're using a SPAC merger with Launch One Acquisition Corp. The deal's valued at about $180 million.
Right, the SPAC route. And this move involves a rebrand. They'll become Mado US 1 probably late 2025. And that SPAC transaction, it's projected to unlock around $240 million in growth capital for them.
So that's a significant chunk of change.
It is. And it highlights, an interesting pathway to the public markets, especially for companies working on these highly specialized therapies.
So for an area as specialized as mitochondrial augmentation, what does a SPAC merger tell us about the current funding landscape, especially for these really innovative but maybe earlier stage therapies?
Well, it's a really insightful question, I think. It shows how these innovative but very capital-intensive fields like mitochondrial therapies are exploring alternatives to the traditional IPO.
Because maybe the traditional route is harder for them.
Could be, or maybe just slower. Manovia's lead candidate, for example, MNV201, it's a stem cell therapy enriched with donor mitochondria. Very complex stuff, designed to tackle diseases caused by mitochondrial dysfunction.
Like Pearson syndrome.
Exactly. It's in phase 2 for Pearson syndrome. That's a rare, serious genetic disorder affecting energy production. And it's also in phase IB for myelodysplastic syndrome, or MDS, which are cancers affecting blood cell development.
So really serious unmet needs.
Huge unmet needs. And a SPAC can offer a potentially faster route to going public and getting access to that significant growth capital, which is absolutely crucial for advancing complex, cutting-edge therapies like this one, especially in rare diseases where patient numbers are small, but the need is immense.
So it's kind of a calculated bet by investors.
I think so. A bet on the long-term potential of these potentially breakthrough areas, even acknowledging the inherent risks involved. It connects to the bigger picture of how we fund highly specialized, maybe niche therapies.
Yeah, it really demonstrates the different paths companies are taking now for funding and trying to keep innovation moving forward in biotech. From those massive pharma deals to these alternative public market entries.
A diverse ecosystem.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you, the informed observer?
Well, this collection of updates really gives us a vivid snapshot, doesn't it, of the intense dynamism in biotech.
Absolutely.
You see strategic partnerships, big validation deals, but also the really complex reality of drug trials and those crucial, sometimes painful lessons learned from high-profile setbacks like TIGIT.
Indeed. I think the overall picture we've painted today is this fascinating blend. Significant scientific breakthroughs happening alongside really persistent challenges in clinical development. And underneath it all, this continuous evolution of scientific understanding and market strategies.
It's like a constant dance.
It really is a dance between, audacious bets on the future and sometimes quite humbling realities.
So here's a final thought for you to maybe chew on. Given the immense investment we see and then these high-profile failures like Tidget, how should we, as informed observers, balance that excitement around scientific advancement with a, let's face it, realistic understanding of the long, often incredibly challenging road from the lab to the market? That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Or maybe $1 billion in Tidget's case.
Right. What does this tell us about the very nature of innovation itself? Is it just inherently about accepting a high rate of failure? And if so, how do we make sure we sustain and support the breakthroughs that do eventually succeed? Something to think about.
Definitely food for thought.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
You have been listening to the Bowtide Biotech podcast. Make sure to check us out on Substack, X, and LinkedIn at Bowtide Biotech for even more insights and updates. We appreciate your support and see you next week.